The airport terminal buzzed with the sounds of rolling suitcases and excited travelers. But Naomi Roberts sat frozen in a leather chair near gate 14, staring at her phone screen. Her hands trembled as she read the message again, hoping the words would somehow rearrange themselves into something that made sense, something that didn't shatter her entire world into pieces too small to pick up. Don't come to the airport. Taking Bethany to the Maldives instead. She's been working hard and deserves this vacation more than you. We'll talk when I get back. The penthouse key is under the mat. Don't call me. The text had arrived at 6:47 a.m., exactly 13 minutes after Naomi had loaded her suitcases into her car, applied her favorite lipstick, and driven through early morning traffic to catch their 9:30 a.m. flight. Their 10th anniversary trip. The vacation Alexander had planned himself, or so she'd thought. 2 weeks in the Maldives at a resort that cost more per night than most people earned in a month. Naomi looked down at her carefully chosen travel outfit. A bright blue linen dress that Alexander had always complimented, comfortable sandals, her grandmother's pearl earrings. She'd spent the previous evening getting her hair done, her nails painted a cheerful coral color. She'd packed his favorite cologne in her carry-on as a surprise. She'd been so stupidly, blindly happy. Around her, couples checked their boarding passes and discussed their vacation plans. A young woman squealed with delight as her boyfriend revealed an upgraded ticket. An elderly couple held hands, their matching luggage tags suggesting decades of traveling together. Naomi felt like a ghost watching a life she no longer belonged to. Her phone buzzed again. For a moment, hope flared in her chest. Maybe it was a joke. Maybe Alexander would say this was some twisted test, some horrible mistake. It was Rachel, her best friend since college. Girl, where are you? Thought you'd be on a plane by now. Send pics from the resort. Naomi's fingers hovered over the keyboard. What could she even say? How did you explain that your husband of 10 years had replaced you with his secretary for your anniversary trip? That he'd sent a text message instead of having the courage to say it to your face? She looked at her 2 suitcases, sitting beside her chair like loyal dogs waiting for a walk that would never come. Inside one was the emerald green bikini she'd bought specially for this trip, the silk pajamas, the sundresses in every color. Inside the other were Alexander's things, carefully packed because he always forgot something important. She'd included his special sunscreen, the book he'd been meaning to read, his lucky watch even though he'd said he wouldn't need it. The departure board flipped, updating flight information. Her flight still showed on time. Gate 14. Boarding in 40 minutes. She imagined Alexander and Bethany somewhere in this same airport, maybe at a different gate, maybe in a first-class lounge, laughing about something. Did Bethany know this was supposed to be Naomi's trip? Did she care? Naomi thought about Bethany Wilson. 26 years old, efficient, always perfectly dressed in crisp white blouses and dark skirts. She'd been Alexander's secretary for 18 months. Naomi had met her at the company Christmas party, had shaken her hand, had told Alexander later that night that he'd made a good hire. Bethany had looked Naomi straight in the eye and thanked her for the compliment. How long had it been going on? Months? The entire 18 months? Naomi's mind raced through memories, looking for clues she'd missed. The late nights at the office. The business trips that seemed to multiply. The way Alexander had stopped asking about her day. The distance that had grown so gradually she'd barely noticed until it was a canyon between them. She stood up, her legs unsteady. Other passengers moved around her, focused on their own journeys, their own lives. No one noticed the woman in the blue dress whose world had just ended via text message. No one saw her pick up her phone and call the airline. I need to cancel my tickets for flight 847 to mail, she said, her voice surprisingly steady. Both tickets. Last name Roberts. The airline representative expressed sympathy for her emergency, whatever it was. Naomi didn't correct her assumption that someone had died. Someone had, in a way. The version of herself who'd woken up that morning believing she was loved, valued, cherished. She wheeled her suitcases back through the terminal, past the security checkpoint, past the coffee stands and gift shops. In the parking garage, she loaded everything back into her car, the same car she'd driven here less than an hour ago when her biggest worry had been whether she'd packed enough sunscreen. The drive home took 30 minutes. 30 minutes of silence except for the sound of her turn signal and the hum of tires on pavement. She didn't turn on the radio. She couldn't bear the cheerful morning DJ banter or the love songs that would mock her stupidity. The penthouse was on the 42nd floor of the Sterling Tower, the most exclusive building in the city. Alexander had bought it 5 years ago, back when things were still good between them. Back when he'd kiss her goodbye every morning and tell her she was the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen. Back when she'd believed him. She parked in her assigned spot and took the elevator up, watching the numbers climb. The elevator was mirrored and she caught sight of herself. A beautiful African-American woman with dark eyes that should have been sparkling with anticipation but instead looked hollow. Her natural hair was styled perfectly, her makeup flawless, but she looked like a painting of a person rather than an actual human being. The penthouse door opened with her key. No key under the mat yet. Alexander and Bethany were probably still in the air, drinking champagne, planning their perfect vacation in Naomi's place. The space felt different now, contaminated. The white leather sofa where they'd watched movies. The marble kitchen where she'd cooked his favorite meals. The floor-to-ceiling windows with views of the city skyline, the same view she'd admired while believing she had a partner, a teammate, a husband who honored his vows. Naomi set her suitcases down in the hallway and walked to the master bedroom. Their bedroom. The bed was perfectly made because she'd made it yesterday morning before leaving for her hair appointment. Alexander's side table still held his reading glasses and a biography of some tech mogul he admired. Her side table held a framed photo from their wedding day, both of them smiling like they'd won the lottery. She picked up the frame and looked at it closely. Alexander in his custom tuxedo, herself in a white gown that had taken 6 months to design. They'd gotten married on a beach at sunset, surrounded by 200 guests. Her parents had cried. His parents had flown in from London. Everyone had said they were perfect together. 10 years ago. A decade of marriage that he'd just erased with a text message and a plane ticket for another woman. Naomi set the frame face down and walked to Alexander's closet. His clothes hung in perfect rows, organized by color and season. Suits that cost thousands of dollars each. Shoes lined up like soldiers. Everything in its place, everything controlled and managed. Just like their marriage had been, she realized now. Controlled by him, managed by him, while she'd played the role of the devoted wife who asked for nothing except his time and attention. And he couldn't even give her that. She pulled out her phone and opened her contacts. Rachel's name sat at the top of her favorites list. Below that was her sister Denise, then her mother, then a few other friends. And there, with a heart emoji she'd added years ago, was Alexander. Naomi deleted the heart emoji. It felt like a small, petty victory, but it was something. Then she scrolled past Rachel and found a name she hadn't called in years. Patricia Holloway. They'd gone to law school together before Naomi had dropped out to support Alexander's business ventures. Patricia had gone on to become one of the best divorce attorneys in the state. The call connected on the second ring. Naomi Roberts. Patricia's voice held surprise and warmth. It's been forever. How are you? I need a divorce lawyer, Naomi said. And I need one who can work fast. There was a pause, then Patricia's tone shifted to pure professional focus. Where are you right now? Home. The penthouse. Alexander is on a plane to the Maldives with his secretary. Our anniversary trip. He texted me at the airport. Don't touch anything else in that house except your personal items, Patricia said immediately. I'm sending you an address. Can you meet me in an hour? Yes. Good. Bring your laptop, any financial documents you can access, and anything else that might be useful. And Naomi? Yes. This is going to hurt, but you're going to survive it. I promise. Naomi ended the call and looked around the penthouse one more time. The morning sunlight streamed through those expensive windows, illuminating the life she'd built with a man who'd thrown it away like trash. But Patricia was right. This was going to hurt. It already hurt more than she'd imagined possible. But she would survive. She had to. Patricia Holloway's office was nothing like the cold, intimidating spaces Naomi had imagined lawyer offices to be. The walls were painted a soft gray, decorated with abstract art in vibrant reds and blues. The furniture was comfortable without being too casual, and Patricia herself wore a maroon blazer that somehow made her look both approachable and formidable. Coffee or water? Patricia asked as Naomi settled into a chair across from her desk. Coffee. Strong. Patricia smiled, an expression that suggested she'd heard that request many times before. She pressed a button on her phone and ordered 2 coffees, then pulled out a yellow legal pad and a pen. Tell me everything, she said. Start from this morning and then work backwards. I need to understand the full picture. Naomi took a breath and began. She told Patricia about the text message, about standing in the airport like a fool, about the carefully planned anniversary trip that Alexander had stolen from her. Then she went back further, describing the last year of their marriage. The distance. The late nights. The way Alexander had started criticizing little things. Her choice of restaurants, her clothing, her friends. How he'd suggested she didn't need to work because his income was enough. How she'd given up her own career ambitions to be the perfect corporate wife, attending dinners and charity events, smiling for photos, asking for nothing. Patricia took notes, her expression neutral but focused. When Naomi finished, she looked up. How much do you know about Alexander's finances? I know he's successful. The company, Roberts Tech Solutions, it's worth millions. Maybe more. He handles all our accounts. Do you have access to any bank accounts? Just the household account. He deposits money monthly for expenses. How much? 10,000. Patricia wrote something down. And the penthouse is in both your names? I think so. We bought it together. You think so or you know so? Naomi felt her face flush. I should know. I signed papers. But Alexander handled everything. That's what we're going to find out. Patricia pulled out her laptop and opened several windows. I need you to log into any accounts you have access to. Bank accounts, credit cards, anything. We're going to see what Alexander has been doing with your marital assets. For the next hour they went through everything Naomi could access. The household account showed regular deposits and normal expenses. Groceries, utilities, gas. But there was another credit card Naomi rarely used, one tied to Alexander's business. When she logged into it, Patricia leaned forward. Look at these charges, Patricia said, pointing at the screen. January 15th, jewelry store, $3,000. February 3rd, day spa, $500. February 20th, Hotel Meridian, 2 nights, $1,500. March 7th, lingerie boutique, $800. Naomi felt sick. Our anniversary is in March. He gave me a bracelet. How much was the bracelet worth? He said it was around $2,000. Patricia scrolled through more charges. Here's a jewelry store charge for $2,000 on March 5th. But look at this one from February. $3,000. He bought someone else more expensive jewelry a month before your anniversary. The coffee arrived, but Naomi couldn't drink it. She stared at the screen, watching months of betrayal scroll past in neat columns of numbers. Dinners at expensive restaurants on nights Alexander said he was working late. Hotel charges in their own city. Purchases from stores she'd never been to. He's been spending marital funds on her, Patricia said. That's actually good news for us. How is any of this good news? Because it shows a pattern of marital misconduct and financial misappropriation. In a divorce, the court doesn't look kindly on spouses who waste marital assets on affairs. Patricia printed out several pages of charges. What else can you access? I have keys to his home office. He keeps files there. Can you get them without him knowing? He won't be back for 2 weeks. Patricia looked at her calendar. That gives us time. I need you to go back to that penthouse and document everything. Photos of expensive items, copies of any documents you can find, anything that shows assets or income. Can you do that? Naomi thought about walking back into that space, rifling through Alexander's private papers, betraying the trust of their marriage. Then she remembered the text message. The casual cruelty of it. The way he put his secretary's needs above his wife's feelings. Yes, she said. I can do that. Good. While you're doing that, I'm going to pull property records, business filings, and anything else that's public. We're going to find out exactly what Alexander Roberts is worth, and then we're going to make sure you get what you're legally entitled to. Patricia walked Naomi to the door, then put a hand on her arm. One more thing. Don't tell anyone what we're doing. Not your friends, not your family. The fewer people who know, the better. Alexander can't hide assets if he doesn't know you're looking for them. What about Rachel? My best friend. Not yet. I know it's hard, but we need to keep this quiet for now. Naomi nodded and left the office. The afternoon sun felt too bright after the dim interior. She sat in her car for a long moment, gathering her courage, then drove back to the penthouse. The space felt different now that she knew she was looking at it with new eyes. Everything had a price tag, a value, a potential role in dividing up a life. She started in Alexander's office, a room she rarely entered. He claimed he needed privacy for business calls, and she'd respected that boundary like she'd respected all his boundaries while he trampled over hers. His desk was neat, everything organized in file folders and labeled containers. She pulled out her phone and started taking photos. Bank statements showing accounts she'd never heard of. Investment documents for stocks and bonds in his name only. Insurance policies. Property deeds. There was a locked drawer in the bottom of his desk. Naomi searched for a key, finally finding one taped under the desk lamp. Inside the drawer was a leather folder. She opened it and found copies of their prenuptial agreement. Naomi's hands shook as she read through it. She'd signed this 10 years ago, trusting Alexander when he said it was just a formality, something his lawyers insisted on. Now she read the actual terms. If they divorced for any reason, she would receive a settlement of $500,000 and nothing more. No claim to his business, no share of assets acquired during the marriage, no ongoing support. $500,000. It sounded like a lot until she thought about 10 years of her life. 10 years of supporting his career, hosting his clients, giving up her own ambitions. 10 years that he valued at $50,000 per year. She photographed every page, then put everything back exactly as she'd found it. In the bedroom, she documented jewelry he'd given her over the years. In the closet, she found boxes of clothes still with tags attached, expensive items he'd bought but never worn. In the bathroom, she found a receipt tucked in a drawer. Hotel Meridian, suite upgrade, champagne and strawberries, charged to their joint credit card 3 months ago. She'd been home that night. Alexander had said he was at a business conference across town. By the time she finished, it was dark outside. Her phone showed dozens of photos, hundreds of pieces of evidence of a marriage that had been dying while she smiled and pretended everything was perfect. Naomi sent everything to Patricia, then sat on the couch and finally let herself cry. Not quiet tears, but deep, wrenching sobs that came from somewhere in her chest she didn't know existed. She cried for the time she'd wasted. For the dreams she'd given up. For the woman she'd been before she'd made herself smaller to fit into Alexander's perfect corporate life. When she was done crying, she felt hollow but clear. The grief was still there, but underneath it was something harder. Something angry. Something that wanted justice. Her phone buzzed. Patricia. Got everything. This is better than I hoped. Can you meet tomorrow morning? 9 a.m.? Bring your passport and any cash you can access. We need to move fast. Naomi typed back, I'll be there. She walked to the window and looked out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, on a beach halfway around the world, Alexander and Bethany were probably having dinner, watching the sunset, enjoying a vacation that should have been hers. They thought she was sitting at home, sad and waiting for Alexander to come back and explain. They had no idea what was coming. Patricia's office at 9 in the morning looked different than it had the previous afternoon. There was an energy to it now, a sense of purpose. A woman Naomi didn't recognize sat at a small table in the corner, typing rapidly on a laptop. This is Jennifer, Patricia said. She's our forensic accountant. She's been going through everything you sent me. Jennifer looked up and gave Naomi a small smile. She was probably in her 40s, wearing practical clothing and no-nonsense glasses. You did good work yesterday. Very thorough. Thank you, Naomi said, though she felt anything but proud. Thorough felt like another word for betrayal, even though Alexander had betrayed her first. Sit down, Patricia said, gesturing to the chair. We have a lot to discuss. For the next hour, Jennifer walked Naomi through what she'd found. Alexander's company was worth significantly more than Naomi had realized. He had multiple bank accounts, investment portfolios, and properties she'd never heard of. He'd been systematically moving money into accounts in his name only, preparing for something. Maybe he'd been planning this divorce all along. Maybe the affair with Bethany was just the catalyst. The prenup is a problem, Patricia said bluntly. It's valid, it's been 10 years, and unless we can prove it was signed under duress or fraud, it's going to hold up. So I get $500,000 and that's it? Naomi felt the anger rising again. 10 years of my life for $500,000? Not necessarily. The prenup doesn't account for marital misconduct. If we can prove that Alexander was having an affair and spending marital assets on his mistress, we can argue for a larger settlement. The court doesn't like it when one spouse wastes community property on extramarital relationships. Jennifer pulled up a spreadsheet on her laptop. Based on the credit card charges alone, I estimate Alexander spent at least $60,000 on Bethany Wilson over the past 18 months. Hotels, gifts, trips, dinners. All charged to accounts that you, as his wife, had partial ownership of. Can we prove it was for her? Some of it, yes. The Hotel Meridian charges match dates when you were home and Alexander claimed to be at work. I pulled records showing Bethany called in sick those same days. The jewelry store charge has a receipt showing 2 items, an expensive bracelet and a cheaper one. You received the cheaper one. We can subpoena the store records to prove the expensive one went to someone else. Patricia tapped her pen on the desk. Here's what I'm recommending. We file for divorce immediately, citing adultery and financial misconduct. We ask for an immediate freeze on all assets so Alexander can't hide anything else. And we push for a settlement significantly higher than the prenup based on his behavior. How much higher? $2 million. Maybe more if we can prove additional misconduct. Naomi's head spun. $2 million sounded like justice, but it also sounded impossible. Will a court actually give me that? Maybe. Maybe not. But we start high and negotiate down. The point is to hit Alexander hard and fast, before he knows what's happening. Right now he thinks you're at home crying. He has no idea you've lawyered up and documented everything. What do I need to do? Patricia pulled out a folder. First, sign these papers. They authorize me to act on your behalf. Then, we need to talk about your living situation. The penthouse. You can't stay there. Once we file for divorce, things are going to get ugly. Alexander is going to be angry, and people do stupid things when they're angry. You need to be somewhere safe, somewhere he can't find you. I can stay with my sister. Does Alexander know where your sister lives? Yes. Then that won't work. We need somewhere he won't think to look. Jennifer spoke up. I have a property. A small apartment I rent out, but it's vacant right now. 2 bedrooms, furnished, in a neighborhood across town. You can stay there for as long as you need. I can't afford rent right now. You're not going to pay rent. Consider it part of our services. You're going to win this case, Naomi, and when you do, we'll settle accounts then. Right now, you just need a safe place to land. Naomi felt tears prick her eyes again, but this time they were different. These were tears of gratitude, of relief that someone was on her side. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, Jennifer said with a dry smile. Wait until you see how small the closet is. They spent the rest of the morning working through logistics. Naomi signed papers, provided information, and answered questions about her marriage that felt invasive but necessary. Patricia explained the process. They would file for divorce in 3 days, after Naomi had time to move out of the penthouse. They would request an emergency hearing for asset freezing. They would serve Alexander with papers the moment he returned from the Maldives. He's going to know something is wrong when he gets back and the house is empty, Naomi said. Let him wonder, Patricia replied. Uncertainty is a powerful weapon. By the time he figures out what's happening, we'll be 3 steps ahead. That afternoon, Naomi went back to the penthouse one last time. She packed her clothes, her personal items, her photos. She left behind anything Alexander had given her. Jewelry, expensive handbags, designer shoes. She wanted nothing from him except what was legally hers. She hired movers Patricia recommended, people who were discreet and fast. They loaded everything into a truck while Naomi did one final walkthrough. In the bedroom, she took down the wedding photo from her nightstand and placed it face down on Alexander's side of the bed. A small gesture, but it felt significant. In the kitchen, she poured out the bottle of expensive wine Alexander had been saving for a special occasion. She watched it swirl down the drain, red as blood, wasted just like their marriage. In the living room, she stood at the windows one last time and looked out at the city. This had been her view for 5 years. Her home. Her life. But it had all been built on lies and compromise and her own willingness to make herself smaller so Alexander could feel bigger. She was done being small. The apartment Jennifer had offered was in a neighborhood Naomi had never visited. It was older, less polished than the penthouse, but it was clean and quiet. The furniture was simple but comfortable. The windows looked out at a small park where children played and dog walkers strolled. Naomi unpacked her suitcases and arranged her things in the tiny closet. Her clothes looked lost in the small space like they were used to more room. She put her toiletries in the bathroom and her laptop on the small desk in the second bedroom. That night, she sat on the sofa and called her sister Denise. I need to tell you something, Naomi said. But you have to promise not to tell anyone, not even Mom. What's wrong? You sound strange. I'm leaving Alexander. I've moved out. I'm filing for divorce. There was a long silence. Then Denise said, Thank God. What? Naomi, we've all been waiting for you to wake up. That man has been treating you like an accessory for years. You stopped being yourself. You stopped calling. You stopped having opinions about anything. You never said anything. Would you have listened? You were so determined to make it work. To be the perfect wife. But perfect isn't the same as happy. Naomi felt something crack inside her chest. I thought I was happy. No, you thought you were supposed to be happy. There's a difference. They talked for an hour. Denise made Naomi promise to stay safe, to keep her location secret, to call if she needed anything. When they hung up, Naomi felt lighter somehow, like sharing the truth had released some pressure she hadn't known she was carrying. The next morning, Patricia called with news. The penthouse is in both your names, but Alexander put a clause in the deed that gives him first right of refusal if it's ever sold. He has to approve any sale. So I'm trapped. Not exactly. I've been thinking. What if we sell it anyway? He'd never approve it. He doesn't have to know until it's done. We list it under an LLC, market it aggressively, and find a cash buyer who can close fast. By the time Alexander gets back from his vacation, the sale will be complete. Is that legal? It's borderline. But your name is on the deed, which means you have the legal right to sell. The clause about his approval is for protections against loss, but if we sell at market value or above, he can't claim damages. The worst that happens is he sues to reverse the sale, but by then the money will be in escrow and we'll have leverage. Do it, Naomi said. Sell it? Patricia laughed, a sound of pure satisfaction. I was hoping you'd say that. I already have a realtor standing by. She's the best in the business and she's very good at keeping secrets. The realtor's name was Simone, and she arrived at the penthouse that afternoon with a photographer and a staging consultant. They walked through every room taking notes and pictures. This will sell in 48 hours, Simone said confidently. Possibly faster. Properties like this don't stay on the market. I have 3 clients who've been waiting for something in this building. How much? Naomi asked. List price? 4.2 million. But I think we can get 4.5, maybe more if we start a bidding war. Naomi did the math in her head. Half of 4.5 million was 2.25. More than Patricia had asked for in the divorce settlement. Enough to start over. Enough to build a new life. How fast can you move? List it tonight, show it tomorrow, close within the week if the buyer pays cash. Which they will at this price point. Then do it. By evening, the penthouse was listed on exclusive real estate sites, marketed to wealthy buyers looking for luxury properties. The photos made it look like a magazine spread. Perfect lighting, perfect angles, a perfect life that had never actually existed. Naomi sat in her new apartment and watched the listing go live on her laptop. $4.5 million for a space that had been a prison disguised as a palace. Her phone rang. Rachel. Girl, I've been calling you for days. Where are you? Did you make it to the Maldives? Send pictures. Naomi took a breath. She hated lying to Rachel, but Patricia had been clear. The fewer people who knew, the safer she was. I'm around. The trip got complicated. I'll explain later. Is everything okay? You sound weird. Everything is fine. I just need some space right now. I'll call you next week. She hung up before Rachel could ask more questions. It felt wrong keeping secrets from her best friend, but it felt necessary too. This was her fight. Her revenge. Her new beginning. And she was going to see it through to the end. The penthouse sold in 36 hours. Not 48 like Simone had predicted, but 36. A cash buyer, no inspection, no contingencies. $4.6 million, $100,000 over asking price because 2 buyers had gotten into a bidding war over who wanted it more. Naomi sat in Simone's office as the contracts were signed. The buyer was a tech entrepreneur who just sold his startup and wanted a showcase property in the city. He didn't ask questions about why the sale was happening so fast. People with that much money rarely asked questions. They just paid and moved on. The funds will transfer to escrow tomorrow, Simone said, sliding the final papers across her desk. Closing is in 5 days. After fees and taxes, you'll walk away with approximately $2.1 million. $2.1 million. Naomi's share of the penthouse she'd thought of as their dream home. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like arithmetic, like calculating the value of wasted years. What happens when Alexander finds out? Naomi asked. Simone smiled, a sharp expression that suggested she'd handled difficult situations before. His lawyer can throw a fit, but the sale is legal. Your name was on the deed. You had the right to sell. If he wants to sue, he can try, but by then the money will be distributed and the new owner will have possession. Unwinding a cash sale is nearly impossible. Patricia had joined them for the signing. Now she leaned forward. We're going to move fast once the funds clear. Transfer everything to accounts Alexander doesn't know about. Lock it down so he can't touch it even if he tries. What about the divorce filing? We file the day after the money clears. By the time Alexander lands back in the country, he'll be served with divorce papers, the penthouse will be sold, and you'll be untouchable. Naomi signed the last document and pushed it back across the desk. Do it. That evening, she sat in her small apartment and tried to process what she'd done. In less than a week, she'd gone from betrayed wife to active agent in her own divorce. She'd documented evidence, hired lawyers, sold their home, and prepared to disappear. It felt surreal, like she was watching someone else's life unfold. Her phone buzzed with a message from her sister Denise. Mom is asking questions about you and Alexander. What should I tell her? Naomi thought about her mother, a traditional woman who believed marriage was sacred and divorce was failure. She'd been so proud when Naomi married Alexander, so pleased that her daughter had landed a successful man. She wouldn't understand this. Not yet. Tell her we're fine. I'll explain everything when the time is right. She's not going to like this. I know. But it's not her life. Naomi put her phone down and walked to the window. The park below was empty now, lit by street lamps. A couple walked past, holding hands, laughing about something. Naomi wondered if they were happy or just pretending, if she'd ever know the difference again. The next day Patricia called with more news. The money cleared. It's sitting in escrow. I've set up 3 separate accounts for you. 1 checking, 1 savings, 1 investment. All at a bank Alexander doesn't use. All with new account numbers he can't trace. What about the divorce filing? Going to the courthouse in an hour. By end of day today, Alexander Roberts will officially be served with divorce papers. He's still on the plane. They don't land until tomorrow afternoon. I know. Which means he'll walk off that plane, bronzed and happy like you said, expecting to find you at home waiting. Instead, he'll find divorce papers and an empty penthouse. Poetic justice. Naomi felt a smile tug at her lips, the first real smile in days. Good. There's one more thing we need to discuss, Patricia said, her tone shifting. Your exit strategy. My what? Naomi, you can't stay in this city. Once Alexander figures out what happened, he's going to look for you. He's going to be angry. Men like Alexander don't take well to losing control. You need to leave at least until the divorce is finalized. Leave where? Anywhere. Europe, South America, Asia. Somewhere he won't think to look. Somewhere you can start fresh. The idea felt both terrifying and exhilarating. Leave everything. Start over. Become someone new. I've always wanted to see Portugal, Naomi said slowly. The coast. The little towns. Then go to Portugal. Stay for 6 months. A year. As long as it takes. You have the money now. You have the freedom. Use it. That night, Naomi researched Portugal. She looked at rental properties in coastal towns, places with names like Lagos and Cascais. She read about the food, the culture, the warm weather and friendly people. She imagined herself in a villa overlooking the ocean, drinking coffee on a terrace, watching the sunset over water. She could do this. She could actually do this. The next morning she booked a flight. 1 week from today she would leave the country. She applied for a long-term visa, using her divorce filing as proof of significant life change. She found a rental property online, a 2-bedroom villa in a small town outside Lagos, available immediately, fully furnished. She paid 6 months' rent in advance. Then she started packing. This time she only took what mattered. Clothes for warm weather. Her laptop. Her passport. Photos of her family. A few books she'd always meant to read. Everything else could stay or go or disappear. She didn't care anymore. Her phone rang. An unknown number. She almost didn't answer, then decided to take the call. Is this Naomi Roberts? A male voice, professional but cold. Who's asking? This is Gregory Marshall, attorney for Alexander Roberts. I understand you've initiated divorce proceedings. So it had happened. Alexander knew. Yes, Naomi said, keeping her voice steady. I have. Mrs. Roberts, I strongly suggest you reconsider this course of action. There are significant financial and legal implications. If you'll agree to meet with me, I'm certain we can reach an amicable solution. I don't want an amicable solution. I want a divorce. Your husband is willing to be generous in the settlement. Far more generous than the prenuptial agreement requires. Tell my husband I'll see him in court. She hung up before the lawyer could respond. Her hands were shaking, but she felt powerful. Like she'd finally said the thing she should have said months or years ago. No. That afternoon, Denise came to visit. She brought wine and takeout food and sat with Naomi in the small apartment, asking questions and offering support. I'm leaving the country, Naomi said. Next week. Portugal. For how long? As long as it takes. Denise poured them both wine. Good. Get away from him. Get away from all of this. Go be yourself again. I'm not sure I know who that is anymore. Then go find out. You've spent 10 years being Alexander's wife. Now you can spend some time being just Naomi. They drank wine and talked about Portugal, about family, about everything except Alexander and Bethany and the divorce. For a few hours, Naomi felt almost normal, almost like the person she used to be before she'd sacrificed herself on the altar of marriage. When Denise left, she hugged Naomi tightly. "Call me when you get there. Send pictures. Live your life." "I will. And Naomi, I'm proud of you. For leaving. For choosing yourself. That takes courage." After Denise was gone, Naomi sat alone in the quiet apartment. She thought about courage, about what it meant to start over. Tomorrow, Alexander would return from the Maldives. He would find the penthouse sold. He would receive the divorce papers. He would call and text and probably show up at places he thought she might be. But she wouldn't be at any of those places. She would be gone. Vanished. Starting a new life in a country where no one knew her as Alexander Roberts' wife. Where she could be just Naomi, whoever that turned out to be. She pulled out her laptop and looked at the villa rental one more time. White walls, blue shutters, a terrace with ocean views. A place that looked like peace. 1 week. 7 more days. Then freedom. The flight to Lisbon left at 11 in the evening, a night departure that felt appropriate for someone disappearing. Naomi checked in with only 2 suitcases and a carry-on, her entire life compressed into bags that fit in an overhead compartment. Denise had driven her to the airport, both of them quiet during the ride. At the departure curb, her sister had grabbed her hand. "You're doing the right thing," Denise said. "You know that, right?" "I hope so." "Not hope. No. Alexander doesn't deserve you. He never did." They hugged goodbye and Naomi walked into the terminal alone. She disabled the location services on her phone. Changed her number and email. Left instructions with Patricia that no one was to know where she'd gone, not even family except Denise. The flight was half empty, business travelers and a few tourists. Naomi had a window seat and spent the first hour watching the city lights disappear below her. Somewhere down there, Alexander was discovering the extent of what she'd done. The sold penthouse. The emptied accounts she'd had legal access to. The divorce filing that detailed his affair and financial misconduct. Patricia had texted an hour ago. "His lawyer is threatening to sue everyone. Let him try. Everything we did was legal. Enjoy Portugal." Naomi tried to sleep but couldn't. Instead, she watched movies on the tiny screen and thought about what came next. She'd spent so much energy planning her escape that she hadn't really considered what her new life would actually look like. Who was she without Alexander? Without the role of corporate wife, hostess, supportive partner? She didn't know yet. But she was going to find out. The plane landed in Lisbon at noon local time. Naomi collected her bags and took a taxi to the train station, where she caught a regional train south to Lagos. The scenery changed gradually from city to countryside to coast. Rolling hills, white buildings with terracotta roofs, the distant gleam of ocean. The villa was exactly as advertised. Small but charming, with white walls and blue shutters and a terrace that overlooked the water. The owner, an elderly Portuguese woman named Catarina, met her at the door. "Welcome," Catarina said in accented but clear English. "The villa is yours for as long as you need." 6 months, yes. Yes. Maybe longer. Longer is good. Lagos is a place for healing. Many people come here to heal. Catarina showed her through the villa. A living room with comfortable furniture, a small kitchen with blue tiles, 2 bedrooms with crisp white linens. Everything simple and clean and peaceful. "The market is 2 streets away," Catarina explained. "The beach is a 10-minute walk. If you need anything, I live next door. My number is on the refrigerator." After Catarina left, Naomi unpacked her suitcases. She hung her clothes in the closet, arranged her toiletries in the bathroom, set up her laptop on the small desk. Then she walked out to the terrace and looked at the ocean. The water was a brilliant blue, deeper and clearer than any ocean she'd seen before. Boats bobbed in the harbor. Seabirds called and circled. The air smelled like salt and fish and something sweet she couldn't identify. She pulled out her phone and took a picture, then sent it to Denise with a simple message. "I'm here. I'm safe." Her sister responded immediately, "It's beautiful. Proud of you." Naomi put her phone away and just stood there, breathing. For the first time in weeks, she felt like she could take a full breath without her chest aching. The first few days were about settling in. She learned the neighborhood, found the market Catarina had mentioned, discovered a small cafe that served strong coffee and fresh bread. She walked on the beach every morning, feeling sand between her toes, letting the ocean wash away the anger and hurt she'd been carrying. She bought a journal and started writing. Not about Alexander or the divorce, but about herself. What she liked. What she wanted. What she'd given up and what she wanted to reclaim. "I used to paint," she wrote one afternoon on the terrace. "Watercolors. Small scenes, nothing fancy. I stopped when Alexander said it was taking up too much space in the apartment. When did I stop fighting for space? She went to a local art supply store and bought paints, brushes, paper. That evening she sat on the terrace and painted the sunset, mixing colors until she got the exact shade of orange and pink that the sky turned as the sun disappeared into the ocean. The painting was terrible. The proportions were wrong, the colors muddy. But it was hers. She'd made it. For the first time in years, she'd created something just for herself. 1 week turned into 2. Naomi developed a routine. Morning walks on the beach, afternoons painting or reading, evenings at the cafe where she'd become friendly with the owner, a cheerful woman named Isabel who asked no questions and offered endless coffee. She met other expats, people who'd come to Portugal for various reasons. There was Robert, a retired teacher from England. Anna, a photographer from Germany. Carlos, a Brazilian writer working on a novel. They formed a loose group, meeting for dinners and walks and conversations about everything except the lives they'd left behind. Patricia called every week with updates. The divorce was proceeding. Alexander's lawyers were trying to contest the prenup violation, but the evidence was too strong. Bethany had given a deposition admitting to the affair. The credit card charges spoke for themselves. He's offering $2 million to settle quickly, Patricia said during one call. He wants this to go away. How much were you asking for? $3 million plus your share of the penthouse sale. But $2 million plus the penthouse money means you'd walk away with over $4 million total. That's life-changing money, Naomi. What do you think I should do? I think you should take it. Fighting could take years and cost a fortune in legal fees. This way you get paid and you get free. Isn't that what you wanted? Naomi thought about it. $4 million in freedom. The chance to close this chapter completely and never look back. Tell him I'll take $3 million, she said. Not a penny less. If he wants to settle quickly, that's the price. He's not going to like that. I don't care what he likes. $3 million or I'll see him in court. Patricia laughed. I love this version of you. Done. I'll make the counteroffer. 2 days later, Alexander agreed. $3 million to be paid within 30 days. In exchange, Naomi would sign papers agreeing to a complete financial separation, no future claims on his business or assets, no contact between them after the divorce was final. He really wants you gone, Patricia said. He's almost desperate to make this go away. Good. Let him pay for his mistakes. On a Friday afternoon in her 3rd month in Portugal, Naomi sat at Isabel's cafe and read the final divorce documents on her laptop. Patricia had sent them as PDFs with bright red arrows showing where to sign. All done. Isabel asked, refilling her coffee. Almost. Just need to sign. And then? Then I'm free. Naomi pulled out a pen and signed each document. She scanned them with her phone and emailed them back to Patricia. The whole process took less than 10 minutes. 10 minutes to end 10 years of marriage. Her phone rang immediately. Patricia. Congratulations, her lawyer said. You're officially divorced. The money will transfer within the week. Thank you. For everything. Thank me by living a good life. A happy life. That's the best revenge. After Patricia hung up, Naomi sat at the cafe table and tried to figure out how she felt. She'd expected relief, maybe joy. Instead, she just felt tired. Like she'd been holding her breath for months and could finally exhale. You look like you need a celebration, Isabel said, appearing with a bottle of wine. On the house. How did you know? I've seen that look before. That's the face of someone who just got free from something heavy. Isabel poured 2 glasses. To new beginnings. They clinked glasses and drank. The wine was dry and crisp, tasting like sunshine and salt air. That evening, Naomi walked down to the beach and watched the sunset. The sky turned purple and gold, the ocean reflecting the colors back like a mirror. Other people dotted the sand. Couples holding hands, families with children, solo travelers like herself. She thought about texting someone. Denise, Rachel, her mother. Telling them it was done, it was over, she'd won. But she didn't. This moment was hers. Private and quiet and perfect in its own way. She stayed on the beach until the stars came out, bright and clear in a way they never were in the city. She found constellations she remembered from childhood. The Big Dipper, Orion's Belt, Cassiopeia. When she finally walked back to the villa, she felt lighter. Not happy exactly, but settled. Like she'd closed a door on one part of her life and opened a window to whatever came next. Alexander Roberts landed at the airport on a Tuesday afternoon, his skin bronzed from 2 weeks of Maldivian sun. Bethany walked beside him, wearing a bright yellow sundress and designer sunglasses, talking about how they should take more trips like this, how she'd never been so relaxed. He barely heard her. His mind was already on the office, on the deals waiting, on the clients who'd probably been calling while he was away. He turned off his phone for the entire trip, something he never did, determined to enjoy this vacation he'd claimed he deserved. Now, as they walked through the terminal toward baggage claim, he turned his phone back on. It exploded with notifications. Texts from his lawyer Gregory Marshall, "Call me immediately. This is urgent. Alexander, we need to talk now." Missed calls from his business partner. From his accountant. From his mother in London. Email subject lines that made his stomach drop. Divorce proceedings. Property sale notification. Emergency legal matter. "What's wrong?" Bethany asked, noticing his expression. "I don't know yet." He called Gregory while waiting for his luggage. The lawyer answered on the first ring. "Where have you been?" Gregory's voice was tight with anger. "I've been trying to reach you for days. I was on vacation." "What's going on?" "Your wife filed for divorce. 2 weeks ago. She sold the penthouse. She emptied the accounts she had access to. She's gone, Alexander. Vanished. No one knows where she is." The baggage carousel started moving, but Alexander didn't notice. "What do you mean she filed for divorce?" "Exactly what I said. She hired Patricia Holloway, that divorce attorney who specializes in high-profile cases. They documented your affair with your secretary. They filed on grounds of adultery and financial misconduct. And while you were gone, they sold the penthouse for $4.6 million. She can't do that. The penthouse deed requires my approval for any sale. Her name was on the deed. Legally, she had the right to sell. We can try to contest it, but the sale is complete and the money is already distributed. The new owner has taken possession." Alexander felt something cold settle in his chest. "What about our accounts?" "The household account is empty. She withdrew everything she had legal access to. I estimate she took about $200,000 in cash plus her share of the penthouse sale. That's over $2 million. Actually, it's more. She took the sale proceeds and transferred them to accounts we can't trace. By the time we figured out what was happening, it was too late." Bethany tugged on his arm. "Alexander, what's happening?" He shook her off. "Where is Naomi now?" "We don't know. Her sister claims she doesn't know. Her friends don't know. She's not at any property in her name. She changed her phone number and email. It's like she disappeared. People don't just disappear. Your wife did. And there's more. The divorce filing includes depositions from hotel staff, store clerks, and your secretary here confirming the affair. They have credit card statements showing expenditures on gifts, hotel rooms, and trips that match dates when you claim to be working late. They have enough evidence to invalidate the prenup on grounds of marital misconduct." Alexander's bags came around on the carousel. He grabbed them mechanically, his mind racing. This couldn't be happening. Naomi was supposed to be at home, waiting for him to come back and explain. She was supposed to cry and yell and eventually forgive him because that's what she always did. She made everything smooth and easy and comfortable. She wasn't supposed to fight back. "What do we do?" he asked. "We settle. Fast. Before this goes to trial and everything becomes public. Your business reputation is already taking hits. Word is getting out about the affair, about the divorce. Your partners are nervous. Clients are asking questions. I'm not giving her millions of dollars. Then prepare for a very public trial where all your financial records become evidence, where every text message and hotel charge gets read in court, where your business practices get scrutinized. Is that what you want?" Alexander looked at Bethany, who was watching him with growing concern. 2 weeks ago, taking her to the Maldives instead of his wife had seemed like a bold move, a way of claiming his own happiness. Now it looked like the stupidest decision of his life. "I'll call you tomorrow," he told Gregory. "I need time to think." "Don't think too long. Patricia Holloway doesn't wait around." Alexander hung up and looked at Bethany. "We need to go." "What's happening?" "My wife is divorcing me. She sold our house. She took everything she could and disappeared." Bethany's eyes widened. "Can she do that?" Apparently she already did. The drive to the penthouse was silent. Alexander's mind raced through possibilities, scenarios, ways to fix this. He could contest the divorce. He could prove Naomi was unstable, that she'd acted impulsively. He could freeze her accounts, file injunctions, make her life so difficult she'd have to come back and negotiate. Except she was already gone. And she had Patricia Holloway on her side, one of the best divorce attorneys in the state. When they reached the building, the doorman looked uncomfortable. "Mr. Roberts, I should inform you that the penthouse has been sold. The new owner took possession last week." "I know about the sale. I still have my key. Actually, sir, the locks were changed. You're no longer authorized to enter. Alexander felt rage building in his chest. That's my home. It was your home, sir. Now it belongs to someone else. If you need to collect personal items, you'll need to coordinate with the new owner's representative. This is insane. I'm sorry, sir. Those are my instructions. Alexander stood in the lobby of the building where he'd lived for 5 years, staring at the elevator that would no longer take him to his own apartment. His home. His space. Sold out from under him while he was on a beach drinking cocktails. What do we do now? Bethany asked. I don't know. Hotel, I guess. Until I figure this out. They checked into a luxury hotel downtown, a suite that cost $1,500 a night. Alexander spent the evening on the phone with Gregory, his accountant, his business partner. Everyone had questions he couldn't answer. Everyone wanted to know how he'd let this happen. You let your wife have access to accounts, his accountant said. You put her name on the deed. You gave her the tools to do this, Alexander. I trusted her. You cheated on her. Trust is a two-way street. By midnight, Alexander had a clearer picture of his situation. Naomi had taken approximately $2.3 million, her share of the penthouse sale plus the household funds she'd legally accessed. She'd filed for divorce with evidence of adultery and financial misconduct. If this went to trial, he would lose much more than money. He would lose his reputation, possibly his business. Gregory's advice was clear. Settle. Pay her $3 million and make it go away. Sign the papers and move on. $3 million, Alexander said. For 10 years of marriage she spent doing nothing but shopping and going to yoga. For 10 years of marriage where you cheated on her and spent marital funds on your mistress, Gregory corrected. A court will see it her way, not yours. Alexander looked at Bethany, asleep on the hotel bed, her hair spread across the pillow. 2 weeks ago she'd seemed worth everything. Worth leaving his wife, worth the risk, worth the excitement. Now she just looked young and expensive, another complication in a situation spiraling out of control. Make the offer, Alexander told Gregory. $3 million. But I want it in writing that she'll never contact me again, never make any claims on my business, never speak publicly about our marriage. I'll draft the agreement. But Alexander, you need to understand something. You lost this fight. Your wife outmaneuvered you. The best you can do now is damage control. After he hung up, Alexander sat in the dark hotel room and tried to figure out where it had all gone wrong. He built a successful business. Made millions. Given Naomi a beautiful home, financial security, a comfortable life. What more could she have wanted? Respect maybe. Fidelity. The basic courtesy of not being replaced with a younger woman while she waited at the airport with their anniversary trip packed and planned. But Alexander didn't think about those things. Instead, he thought about the money, the house, the public embarrassment of a wife who'd vanished rather than fight openly. He thought about how to spin this to his business associates, how to minimize the damage, how to move forward. He didn't think about Naomi at all, except as a problem to be solved. Which was why he'd already lost. The settlement took 3 weeks to finalize. Alexander agreed to the $3 million, signed the papers, and wired the money to an account controlled by Patricia Holloway. In exchange, Naomi signed a non-disclosure agreement that prevented her from discussing their marriage publicly, along with documents terminating all future claims on his assets. Done, Gregory said when the final paperwork went through. She got what she wanted. Now you can move on. But moving on proved harder than Alexander expected. The first problem was Bethany. In the Maldives, she'd been charming and attentive, grateful for the expensive vacation. Back in reality, she was demanding and exhausting. She wanted dinners at expensive restaurants every night. She wanted jewelry, designer clothes, spa days. She wanted to be seen with him at events, wanted him to introduce her to his business associates as his girlfriend. We need to keep this quiet, Alexander told her one evening at dinner. The divorce isn't even final yet. The divorce is final, Bethany corrected him. I saw the papers on your desk. You're single now. Why are we hiding? Because optics matter. My business associates don't need to know I left my wife for my secretary. Former secretary. I'm not working for you anymore, remember? That was another problem. Bethany had quit her job the day after they returned from the Maldives, claiming it was inappropriate for them to have a professional relationship now that they were personally involved. Alexander had agreed, thinking he'd find another secretary easily enough. He'd been wrong. Every qualified candidate who interviewed for the position asked careful questions about the work environment, about boundaries, about whether the role was actually for secretarial work or something else. Word had gotten out, apparently. Alexander Roberts had an affair with his secretary and left his wife. Now no one wanted the job. His business began suffering too. Two major clients canceled contracts, citing concerns about his judgment and stability. His business partner suggested he take a step back from client-facing work until things settled down. "You're a liability right now," his partner said bluntly. "People don't trust you. They're wondering what else you've been hiding, what other corners you've been cutting." "I run this company," Alexander said. "I built it from nothing. And you're destroying it with your personal drama. Get your house in order, Alexander." Literally and figuratively. At home, which was still a hotel suite because Alexander couldn't bring himself to buy another property yet, Bethany grew increasingly dissatisfied. She complained about the hotel, about not having her own space, about Alexander working all the time. "I thought things would be different once you left your wife," she said one night. "I thought we'd be happy. I'm dealing with a lot right now." "You're always dealing with something. When do I get to matter?" Was a fair question. When Alexander thought about it honestly, which he tried not to do, he realized he didn't actually love Bethany. He'd been infatuated with her, excited by the forbidden nature of their affair. But now that there was nothing forbidden about it, she was just a young woman who wanted things he didn't want to give. The breaking point came 6 weeks after the divorce was final. Bethany had insisted they attend a charity gala, one of the high-profile events that Alexander usually brought clients to. He'd agreed, thinking it would be good to be seen in public, to show that he was moving forward with his life. It was a disaster. People were polite but cold. Business associates who used to seek him out for drinks now made excuses to cut conversations short. Women who'd been friendly with Naomi gave Bethany obvious looks of disapproval. By the end of the evening, Alexander felt like he was standing in a spotlight while everyone whispered just out of earshot. On the drive back to the hotel, Bethany was angry. "That was humiliating. Everyone was judging us. They'll get over it." "No, they won't. You know why? Because you're the guy who dumped his wife for his secretary. That's who you are now. That's your reputation." "My reputation is that I'm a successful businessman." "Was successful. Past tense. Face it, Alexander. You ruined everything for a fling that's already getting old." The truth in her words stung more than he wanted to admit. "If it's so old, maybe you should leave." "Maybe I should. This isn't what you promised. You said things would be better once you were free. But you're not free. You're just alone and broke and bitter." "I'm not broke. You paid your wife $3 million. Your business is failing. You're living in a hotel. That's not the life you sold me on." She packed her bags that night and left. Alexander watched her go, feeling nothing except maybe relief. One less complication. One less person to manage. But the relief didn't last. Alone in the hotel suite, Alexander started noticing things. How quiet it was without anyone else there. How empty the space felt. How much he'd lost in the past 2 months. His business continued to decline. Without major clients, cash flow became a problem. He had to lay off staff, cut back on expenses, defer payments. His business partner suggested they sell the company before its value dropped further. "Sell?" Alexander was shocked. "This is my company. This was your company. Now it's a sinking ship. We can sell while we still have something worth buying, or we can write it down and lose everything." They sold 3 months after the divorce finalized. A tech conglomerate bought Roberts Tech Solutions for a fraction of what it had been worth a year ago. Alexander walked away with enough money to pay off debts and live comfortably, but not enough to maintain the lifestyle he'd built. Not enough to feel like a winner. His mother called from London, her voice sharp with disapproval. "I heard about the divorce. And the sale of your company. What were you thinking, Alexander? Things didn't work out with Naomi. Things didn't work out because you chose to have an affair with your secretary instead of working on your marriage. Now you've lost your wife, your business, and your reputation. Was it worth it? I don't need a lecture. Clearly you do. You've made a mess of everything your father and I taught you about integrity and commitment. Your father built his business on trust. You threw that away for a fling with a girl half your age." After his mother hung up, Alexander sat in his hotel room and tried to figure out when everything had gone wrong. Was it the text message he'd sent to Naomi at the airport? Should he have told her face-to-face instead? Should he have never taken Bethany to the Maldives at all? Or had it started earlier? The first time he'd stayed late at the office when he didn't need to. The first time he'd lied about where he was. The first time he'd looked at Bethany and thought about something more than work. He'd thought he was choosing happiness. Taking control of his life. Doing what he wanted instead of what was expected. Instead, he'd destroyed everything. Alexander moved out of the hotel finally, buying a modest apartment in a neighborhood that was respectable but not prestigious. He furnished it with basic items from retail stores, nothing custom or luxurious. He couldn't afford that lifestyle anymore. Not with the divorce settlement, the business sale, the debts he'd accumulated. One evening, sitting in his new apartment with its blank walls and generic furniture, he pulled out his laptop and searched for Naomi. Social media, Google, anything that might tell him where she'd gone. Nothing. She'd scrubbed her online presence completely. No photos, no posts, no trace. It was like she'd never existed except in his memory. He thought about the text message he'd sent that morning at the airport. How casual he'd been about destroying their marriage. How certain he'd been that she would wait, that she would forgive, that she would be there when he decided to come back. He'd been wrong about everything. His phone buzzed with a notification. A LinkedIn message from a former client who'd canceled his contract. Saw your company sold. Hope you land on your feet. FYI, there's an opening at Hendricks Corp if you're looking for work. Looking for work. Alexander Roberts, who'd built a multi-million-dollar company, was now being offered job suggestions like he was a new graduate starting out. He closed the laptop and sat in the dark apartment, listening to the sounds of the city outside. Somewhere out there, Naomi was living a new life. Happy maybe. Free certainly. She'd taken her share of their marriage and built something new. While he sat in an empty apartment, unemployed and alone, wondering how he'd lost everything so fast. 4 months after arriving in Portugal, Naomi woke up one morning and realized she was happy. Not pretending to be happy. Not performing happiness for someone else's benefit. Actually genuinely happy. She lay in bed in the villa, listening to the sounds of morning. Seabirds calling, distant waves, the church bells from the town center marking 8 o'clock. Sunlight streamed through the white curtains, bright and clean and warm. She got up and made coffee in the small kitchen, then took it out to the terrace. The ocean stretched before her, blue and endless. She'd painted this view a dozen times now, trying to capture the exact color of the water at different times of day. Her paintings lined the villa walls, a visual diary of her time here. Her phone buzzed with a message from Patricia. Final check cleared. Account balance, $4.2 million. You're officially set. Live well. $4.2 million. Her divorce settlement plus the penthouse sale, minus legal fees and taxes. More money than she'd ever imagined having on her own. Money that represented 10 years of her life, yes, but also her freedom to choose what came next. Naomi had been thinking about what came next. She'd spent 4 months healing, painting, walking on the beach. It had been necessary time, important time. But now she felt restless, ready for something more than peaceful existence. She wanted to work. Not because she needed the money, but because she missed using her brain for something besides painting sunsets. Before she'd married Alexander, she'd been studying design, thinking about starting her own consulting business. She'd been good at it too, creative and strategic at once. Maybe it was time to try again. She opened her laptop and started researching. Small businesses in Lagos that might need help with branding, marketing, design. Within an hour, she had a list of 10 prospects. By afternoon, she'd sent introductory emails to all of them, offering free consultations to discuss how she might help them grow. 3 responded within the day. A small hotel that wanted to redesign its website. A restaurant looking to attract more tourists. A boutique wine shop that needed help with social media presence. Naomi met with each one over the following week. She listened to their challenges, offered ideas, and created proposals. 2 of them hired her on the spot. The third asked for time to think about it, then called the next day to say yes. Just like that, she had clients. Just like that, she was working again. The work was different from what she'd imagined doing back in the States. These were small businesses, family-owned operations where everyone wore multiple hats and no one had unlimited budgets. But they were passionate about what they did, and that passion was infectious. Naomi threw herself into the projects. She redesigned the hotel website with bright photos and easy navigation. She created social media campaigns for the restaurant, highlighting their fresh seafood and family recipes. She helped the wine shop organize tasting events and partnered them with local hotels for tourist packages. Within 2 months, all 3 businesses reported increased revenue. The hotel bookings doubled. The restaurant had a waiting list for weekend reservations. The wine shop became a stop on guided tours. Word spread. Other businesses reached out. Naomi hired a local woman named Sophia to help with translation and logistics. Then she hired another assistant, Marco, who was brilliant with graphic design. Before she knew it, she had a small consulting firm operating out of her villa's 2nd bedroom. You should get an office, Sophia suggested one afternoon while they reviewed a client presentation. Something downtown, professional. Maybe. But I like working here. The terrace views are inspiring. The terrace views mean we take long lunch breaks to look at the ocean instead of finishing projects. Naomi laughed. That's a feature, not a bug. She'd started making friends beyond her work circle too. There was Isabel from the cafe, who'd become close enough that they had dinner together twice a week. There was Tomas, who owned the bookstore in the old town and recommended novels in his quiet, thoughtful way. There was a group of expat women who met monthly for wine and conversation, sharing stories about the lives they'd left behind and the new ones they were building. One evening, sitting at a beachside restaurant with Isabel, Naomi realized how different her life looked now compared to 6 months ago. She wore simple clothes, jeans, a bright red t-shirt, sandals. Her hair was natural, unstraightened and unstyled except for a clip to keep it back. She'd stopped wearing makeup except for special occasions. She looked nothing like the polished corporate wife who'd attended charity galas in designer gowns. She looked like herself. You seem lighter, Isabel said, pouring more wine. When you first arrived you carried so much weight. Now you move differently. I feel different. Like I've remembered who I used to be before I tried to become someone else. And who is that? I'm still figuring it out. But she's someone who paints badly and works too much and loves the ocean. Someone who can be happy without performing happiness for anyone else. Isabel raised her glass. To the real Naomi. Welcome back. They clinked glasses and drank, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. Other diners laughed and talked around them, couples and families and groups of friends. Naomi didn't feel lonely anymore. She felt present. Alive. Her phone rang. Denise. Hey sister. How's paradise? Paradise is good. How's everything there? Chaotic as always. Mom's asking about you again. She wants to know when you're coming home. This is home now. There was a pause. You're staying? Permanently? I don't know about permanently. But for now, yes. I have a business here. Friends. A life. I'm happy for you. Honestly. You sound more like yourself than you have in years. I'm myself. That's the point. After they hung up, Naomi sat at the restaurant and thought about the word, home. Was it a place? A feeling? A collection of people and experiences? She'd lived in the penthouse for 5 years but it had never felt like home, not really. It had felt like a showroom, a space designed to impress rather than comfort. The villa felt like home. Lagos felt like home. This terrace overlooking the ocean, this cafe where everyone knew her name, this community of kind people who asked nothing of her except that she show up authentically. This was home. One evening she went to Tomas's bookstore. It was a small space crammed with books in multiple languages, the kind of place where you could browse for hours and discover unexpected treasures. I'm looking for something about starting over, Naomi told him. Fiction maybe. Something hopeful but not preachy. Tomas thought for a moment, then pulled a book from a high shelf. Try this. It's about a woman who moves to Italy after a divorce and builds a new life. Very honest about the hard parts but also full of joy. Sounds perfect. It is. Also, I've been meaning to ask you something. Tomas looked uncharacteristically nervous. There's a festival next weekend. Music, food, dancing. Would you like to go? As friends? He added quickly. Just to show you more of local culture. Naomi smiled. I'd like that. As friends. The festival was everything Tomas promised. Lively music, delicious food, people dancing in the streets. Naomi and Tomas walked through the crowds, trying different foods, watching performers, laughing at their attempts to dance to Portuguese folk music. It wasn't romantic. It was just easy. Comfortable. The kind of friendship where you could be quiet together or talk for hours, where there was no pressure to be anything except present. That's what Naomi wanted now. Presence. Authenticity. The freedom to build a life based on what she wanted rather than what someone else expected. She'd spent 10 years trying to be the perfect wife, the perfect hostess, the perfect accessory to Alexander's ambitions. She'd made herself smaller, quieter, less demanding. She'd given up her own dreams to support his. Never again. Now she had her own business, her own home, her own friends and routines and small daily joys. She painted when she wanted to paint. She worked when she wanted to work. She said no without guilt and yes without obligation. She was free. And it felt better than she'd ever imagined. 8 months after the divorce was finalized, Alexander sat in a modest conference room with his lawyer and a representative from Hendricks Corp., preparing to sign an employment contract. Not a partnership. Not a leadership role. A standard employment contract with a salary that was comfortable but nowhere near what he'd earned running his own company. The role is senior technology consultant, the HR representative explained. You'll work with our clients on implementation projects. 40 hours a week, standard benefits package, 2 weeks vacation to start. 2 weeks vacation. Alexander had taken month-long trips when he'd run Robert's Tech Solutions. He'd set his own schedule, answered to no one. Now he would have a boss, a timesheet, and 2 weeks vacation. Sounds good, he said, because what else could he say? He needed the job. His savings were running low after the divorce settlement, the business sale, and months of unemployment. He signed the papers and shook hands with people who would now tell him what to do. On the way out, he passed a bulletin board with employee photos and achievements. Young faces, energetic and ambitious, the kind of people he used to hire. Now he was one of them, starting over in his 40s. His new apartment was a 15-minute walk from the office. It was small but functional. 1 bedroom, a living area, a kitchen with basic appliances. Nothing like the penthouse with its floor-to-ceiling windows and marble countertops. But it was his, paid for with money he'd earned himself after everything fell apart. The first few weeks at Hendrix Corp were humbling. He attended training sessions on their systems and procedures, many of which he found obvious or outdated. But he kept his opinions to himself and did what was asked. He needed this job. He couldn't afford to let pride get in the way. His co-workers were friendly but professional. They knew his history. It was impossible not to in the small tech community. But they were polite enough not to mention it directly. Instead, they asked careful questions about his previous work, his experience, his approach to client management. One afternoon, during a team lunch, a younger colleague named Brian asked about Robert's Tech Solutions. I heard your company was really innovative. What happened? Why did you sell? The market changed, Alexander said, which was true but not the truth. The truth was that he'd destroyed his own company through poor judgment and worse choices. But he wasn't about to explain that over sandwiches in the break room. That's too bad. You could probably start something new though, right? With your experience? Could he? Alexander had thought about it. Starting another company, rebuilding what he'd lost. But the idea exhausted him. He didn't have the energy anymore, or the funding, or the reputation. One failed business was enough. Maybe someday, he said. Right now I'm focused on this role. Work kept him busy during the days, but evenings and weekends were difficult. He had no relationship after Bethany left. His friends, mostly business contacts from his previous life, had quietly disappeared once his company sold. His family in London called occasionally, but the conversations were strained and brief. He was lonely in a way he'd never experienced before. Not alone, which he'd been many times. But lonely, which was different. Alone meant solitude. Lonely meant isolation despite being surrounded by people. One Saturday evening, scrolling through social media from his apartment, Alexander came across a photo that stopped him cold. It was shared by a mutual friend, someone who'd been at their wedding years ago. The photo showed a coastal town, white buildings against blue water, and in the corner, barely visible but unmistakable, was Naomi. She was laughing, sitting at an outdoor table with other people. Her hair was natural, curly and free. She wore a green sundress and no jewelry. She looked younger somehow, or maybe just happier. More alive than he'd ever seen her. The caption read, "Unexpected reunion in beautiful Lagos." Some people were meant to find their place. Lagos, Portugal. That's where she'd gone. Alexander zoomed in on the photo, studying her face. She looked nothing like the woman he'd been married to. That Naomi had been polished, careful, contained. This Naomi looked wild in the best way, uncontained and unbothered. He felt something twist in his chest. Not love exactly. More like recognition of what he'd lost. Not just a wife but a person. Someone who'd given him 10 years and asked for nothing except basic respect and fidelity. Things he'd been too selfish to provide. He thought about texting her. He still had her old number saved, though she changed it. He could find her through Denise, her sister. He could apologize, explain that he'd made mistakes, that he understood now what he'd thrown away. But what would be the point? She'd moved on. Built a new life. She was happy, clearly. Why would she want to hear from the man who'd betrayed her? Alexander closed the app and set his phone down. He sat in his small apartment, listening to the sounds of neighbors through thin walls, and tried to accept that this was his life now. Modest apartment. Average job. No relationship, no social life, no grand ambitions. It wasn't the punishment that hurt. It was the recognition that he'd done this to himself. Every choice that led here had been his own. The affair with Bethany. The text message at the airport. The cavalier assumption that Naomi would always be there, always forgive, always wait. He'd been wrong about all of it. The next morning he went for a run in a nearby park. It was something he'd started doing after the divorce, a way to fill empty time and clear his head. Other runners nodded as they passed, strangers acknowledging strangers in the universal language of people trying to stay healthy. He ran past couples walking dogs, families having picnics, teenagers playing basketball. Normal people living normal lives. Once, he would have felt superior to them, proud of his penthouse and his business and his expensive lifestyle. Now he just felt tired. After the run he stopped at a coffee shop. The barista was a young woman with blue hair and a nose ring who called him sir, and made small talk about the weather. Alexander wondered what she saw when she looked at him. Just another middle-aged customer in running clothes, nothing special, nothing worth noticing. He took his coffee to a corner table and opened his laptop. He had work emails to answer, reports to review. The tasks kept him busy but didn't satisfy him. Everything felt hollow, like he was going through motions without purpose. His phone buzzed with a text from Gregory, his lawyer, forwarding something you should see. The attachment was a newspaper article about Patricia Holloway, the divorce attorney who'd represented Naomi. She'd won a major case for another client, securing a record settlement. The article mentioned her track record of representing women in high-profile divorces against wealthy men. It quoted her, "My clients aren't looking for revenge. They're looking for justice and the freedom to rebuild their lives. When someone has been betrayed and undermined, the legal system should help them start fresh." Alexander thought about that word, betrayed. It seemed dramatic until he applied it to his own actions. He'd betrayed Naomi's trust, undermined their marriage, used marital funds to support an affair. When he looked at it honestly, he'd been the villain in this story, not the victim. That was a hard truth to accept. He finished his coffee and closed the laptop. Outside, the city moved on without him. People had places to be, people to see, lives that mattered. Alexander had work tomorrow and the day after that and the day after that. A steady job, a modest income, and no one waiting at home. It was a far cry from the penthouse and the private jets and the business empire he'd built. But it was what he had now. What he'd earned through his choices. And somewhere in Portugal, Naomi was living her best life, probably not thinking about him at all. That was the worst part. Not that she hated him. That she'd moved on so completely that he was irrelevant. Alexander walked back to his apartment through autumn streets, leaves falling around him like pieces of the life he used to have. By the time he reached his door, he'd made a decision. He wasn't going to try to contact Naomi. He wasn't going to apologize or explain or ask for forgiveness. She'd earned her freedom from him and he was going to respect it. It was the least he could do. 1 year and 2 months after leaving the country, Naomi stood on her terrace watching the sunrise paint the Portuguese coast in shades of pink and gold. She held a cup of coffee, steam rising into cool morning air, and felt completely at peace. So much had changed since that terrible morning at the airport. The morning she discovered her husband's betrayal and decided to take back her life. The morning that had seemed like an ending but had actually been a beginning. Her consulting business had grown beyond anything she'd imagined. She now had 5 full-time employees, an office in Lagos, and clients throughout Portugal and Spain. They specialized in helping small businesses build their brands, focusing on authenticity and community connection rather than aggressive marketing. It was work that mattered to her. Work that helped real people build real lives. Every success story felt personal, like proof that starting over was possible. Her phone buzzed with a message from Patricia. Final legal notice arrived. Divorce paperwork officially closed. You're free in every legal sense. Congratulations again. Free. Such a simple word for such a profound feeling. Naomi walked inside and looked at the villa that had become her home. The walls were covered with her paintings now, a year's worth of attempts to capture the ocean at different times and moods. Some were terrible. Some were actually good. All of them were hers. Her laptop sat open on the kitchen table, showing the website she designed for her business. Redesign Consulting, building authentic brands for real people. The tagline had come to her one morning after coffee with Isabel. Authenticity was the thing missing from her old life, the thing that made her new life worth living. She checked her calendar. Today was full. Morning meeting with a new client, lunch with Sophia and Marco to plan next quarter's projects, afternoon painting session with Anna the photographer, dinner with the expat group at their favorite restaurant. A full life. A real life. Not performed for anyone's benefit but her own. The doorbell rang. Katerina, her landlady, stood outside holding a basket of fresh bread and pastries. I baked too much, Katerina said, which was what she always said when she brought food. "You'll help me, yes?" "Always. Come in." They sat on the terrace together, eating warm bread and talking about nothing important. Katerina's daughter was getting married. The weather would be perfect for the wedding. The new restaurant on the waterfront had excellent fish. Small talk. Normal conversation. The kind of interaction Naomi had been too busy for in her old life, too focused on appearances and status to notice the simple pleasure of sharing bread with a neighbor. Later that morning she met with her new client, a young couple opening an ecotourism business. They wanted to offer hiking tours and sustainable travel experiences but didn't know how to market themselves. "We don't want to be fake," the wife explained. "All those tourism companies promising authentic experiences that are just tourist traps. We want something real." "Real is harder to sell," Naomi said honestly. "Real means being specific about who you're for and accepting that you won't be for everyone. But real builds loyal customers who come back and tell their friends." She spent 2 hours with them, developing a strategy based on honesty and specificity. No promises of paradise, just genuine experiences with real people. By the end of the meeting, they were excited and ready to launch. Walking back to her office, Naomi passed the bookstore. Tomas was arranging a new display in the window. He waved and she went inside. "Good morning. The book you ordered arrived." He handed her a package. "Also, I'm reading something you might like. About a woman who starts a restaurant in France after leaving a bad relationship. Another food and travel book. You're noticing a pattern. I noticed that stories about women taking back their power make you happy. Why wouldn't I recommend them?" Naomi smiled. Tomas had become a good friend over the past year. They had dinner occasionally, went to festivals and concerts together, talked about books and life. He'd never pushed for anything more, seemed content with friendship. She appreciated that. After Alexander, she needed time to remember who she was without someone else's expectations shaping her. That evening, at dinner with her expat friends, the conversation turned to why everyone had come to Portugal. "Failed marriage," said Catherine, a British woman who ran a yoga studio. "He wanted me to be someone I wasn't." "Burnout," said Robert, the retired teacher. 30 years in classrooms. "I needed peace." "Family problems," said Anna. "Sometimes you need distance to see clearly." When they looked at Naomi, she thought about how to answer. She could tell the whole story, the airport, the betrayal, the revenge. Or she could tell the simpler truth. "I needed to find myself again," she said. "I'd lost track of who I was underneath what everyone else needed me to be." "And did you find yourself?" Catherine asked. "I think so. Or maybe I'm building someone new. Someone who gets to decide what matters." After dinner, walking home through quiet streets, Naomi checked her phone. There was an email from someone named Alexander Roberts at a generic email address. Her finger hovered over the delete button. She hadn't heard from Alexander since the divorce finalized. Patricia had strict instructions that he wasn't to contact her directly. Curiosity won. She opened the email. "Naomi, I know you probably don't want to hear from me. I know I have no right to contact you. But I saw a photo of you online and you looked happy. Really happy. I wanted you to know that I'm glad. I'm sorry for everything I put you through. I'm sorry I didn't value what we had until it was gone. I'm not asking for forgiveness or trying to get back in touch. I just wanted you to know that you deserve the happiness you found. I hope Portugal is everything you wanted. Take care. Alexander." Naomi read it twice, waiting to feel something. Anger. Satisfaction. Vindication. Instead, she just felt nothing. The words were nice, probably sincere. But they didn't matter anymore. Alexander was part of a life she'd left behind, as relevant to her present as high school boyfriends or childhood addresses. She closed the email without responding. Not out of spite, but because there was nothing to say. That chapter was finished, the book closed and shelved. She deleted the email and blocked the address. Then she opened her photos and looked at the pictures from the past year. Paintings on her terrace, coffee with Isabel, hiking with the expat group, her team celebrating a big client win. A year's worth of real moments, genuine smiles, actual happiness. She posted one photo to social media, something she rarely did anymore. It was a sunset photo from her terrace, the ocean stretching to the horizon, the sky painted in impossible colors. The caption was simple, "Year 1 of my new life. Here's to many more." Within minutes, comments appeared. From Denise, "So proud of you." From Rachel, "You glow, girl." From clients and friends and people who'd watched her rebuild from scratch. She didn't post about Alexander or the divorce or the revenge she'd taken. Those things were private, stored in her memory like old photographs you didn't need to look at anymore but couldn't quite throw away. What mattered was this: she'd survived. She'd started over. She'd built something real. That night, lying in bed in her quiet villa, Naomi thought about the woman who'd stood in the airport a year ago, bags packed for a vacation that would never happen. That woman had been so lost. So convinced that being a good wife meant accepting whatever her husband decided. That woman was gone now, replaced by someone stronger. Someone who knew her worth wasn't tied to anyone else's opinion. Someone who could walk away from what hurt her and toward what made her happy. The ocean sound drifted through the open window. Seabirds called. Somewhere in the distance, church bells marked midnight. Naomi closed her eyes and smiled. Tomorrow she had a business to run, friends to see, a life to live. A life she'd chosen, one decision at a time, one brave step after another. Alexander had taken her anniversary trip. She'd taken back her life. And that, she thought as sleep pulled her under, was the best revenge of all.